We'd like to thank our sponsor, Osea, the pioneers of clean, clinically proven skincare from the sea that delivers visible results while respecting the planet. Osea skincare harnesses the benefits of seaweed, a nutrient-rich oceanic plant packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. And from their best-selling Undaria algae body oil and hyaluronic sea serum, every Osea product is formulated to nourish your skin and promote a radiant, healthy complexion. And customers have shared that it makes their skin glow all the time. Their products are vegan, cruelty-free, and free of harmful ingredients like parabens, synthetic fragrances, and sulfates. And as a climate-neutral certified and ocean-positive verified brand, they're dedicated to protecting our oceans and preserving the beauty of our planet for generations to come. You can glow from the inside out with clean vegan skin and body care from Osea. Get 10% off your first order site-wide with code GATEWAYS at oseamalibu.com, and you'll get free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $60. You can head to oseamalibu.com and use the code GATEWAYS for 10% off. Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Chip Conley, who is on a midlife mission. After disrupting the hospitality industry twice, first as the founder of a Joie de Vivre Hospitality, the second largest operator of boutique hotels in the U.S., and then as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy, leading a worldwide revolution in travel, Conley co-founded MEA, known as the Modern Elder Academy, in January 2018 in Baja, California. And he also wrote a book, a New York Times bestseller, called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. And there's so much material on the web that Chip has created about aging and midlife, crisis, really. And we got introduced by a mutual friend. And so I'm very delighted to introduce him to the show. Welcome, Chip.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's not the midlife crisis that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the midlife chrysalis.
That's what I thought. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I messed it up.
No, that's okay. Crisis, chrysalis, they sound alike, but they're very different.
And it's so funny because I've recently listened to a podcast where you spend a lot of time talking about the midlife chrysalis. So, and I think I'm just so programmed with that term, it's just part of like.
Let's be clear. I mean, midlife has the worst brand of any life stage because it has the word crisis attached to it. And yet, if you look at a variety of different things like social science research, like the U curve of happiness, it shows that people's life satisfaction does bottom out around age 45 to 50. But then actually with each decade after that, we get happier and happier. So 50s happier than 40s, 60s happier than 50s, 70s happier than 60s, and women in their 80s happier than 70s. And there's a bunch of other evidence that says like, well, what if midlife isn't really a crisis, but it's really a transformational period? It's a period in which you're metamorphosizing into something new. And yet, yes, there are sometimes circumstances in your life that feel like a crisis, but what they're doing is they're like a crossroads more. They're helping you to see like you're at a crossroads in your life and it's time for you to make the right decisions. If midlife for the butterfly is a chrysalis, maybe midlife for the humans can be a chrysalis as well.
I love that analogy so much because there's something so just beautiful and alchemical really about the whole process. And I, in your TED Talk, you spoke about this like U-shaped curve, right? Which is,
yes.
which goes in line with what you just shared. And so your 40s, like you had mentioned, is kind of like the bottom rung of your happiness quotient, if you will. And so I'm curious, why have you found that people sort of struggle in that period of their life, and what is the sort of catalyst that changes for them as they get a little older?
There's a variety of factors, and this is really what the Modern Elder Academy is all about. MEA, it's helping people to reimagine and repurpose themselves in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And what's really happening, especially in one's 40s, is you're coming face to face with some things that are really troubling. You're coming face to face with mortality, maybe for the first time, with parents or grandparents or people in your life that matter to you, maybe even a spouse or a sibling. You're actually coming face to face with what my friend Brené Brown calls the midlife unraveling. We have raveled up, and something that's raveled is so tightly wound you can't get it undone. We have a ravel of expectations of ourselves, a ravel of hopes and dreams. And it's by our mid 40s that we sort of look and say, like, I'm not going to be president of the United States. I'm not going to be a billionaire. I'm not going to have didn't marry my soulmate. My kids are not going to an Ivy League school. And so some of the dreams like start to fade, and you have disappointment equals expectations minus reality. So expectations are, if they're higher than reality, you have disappointment, and that comes up. Your body starts to actually become more noticeably older than it was in your 30s or your 20s. The list is long. The spinning plate phenomena that we actually spend our 20s, 30s, and 40s accumulating knowledge and friends and stuff, and ultimately kids potentially. And it's around age 45 to 50, you're like, oh my God, I have all these spinning plates, and I feel like I have no time for myself. So these are the kinds of things that are often happening in one's 40s. Now, your mileage may vary. It could happen in your 30s, your 50s, whenever. On average, according to the U-curve of happiness research, it is in mid 40s when you're at that sort of bottom point of feeling all of this. And so it's not unusual. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they feel like they're getting the game of life wrong. And what we try to help people with at MEA is to realize, there's a roadmap that can help you out of this place and help you transition to a better place. So that's why we created MEA.
So I want to talk about the journey towards creating MEA. And, for those who are listening, who might be, in different parts of the world, I'm sure that midlife also means something different to them, right? And so definitely want to, share this from the context of the sort of Western world. What are some of the programs or the ways that you help coach people through this period of life? What are some of the questions that you encourage people to start asking?
Well, let's start with the cross-cultural perspective on midlife. You're absolutely right that midlife is perceived as a negative in many cultures because later life is perceived as negative. So midlife is the doorway to later life, which ultimately leads you to death. And elders are not well respected or loved in those cultures. And the U.S. is probably where that's most noticeable. In cultures where living later in life is something you look forward to and aging is aspirational, midlife is less of a problem. So having said that, the kinds of things that our program really focuses on are really four key pillars. Number one is, how do we reframe our relationship with aging? If we live in a culture in which ageism and aging is seen as a negative, and in many cultures, especially Western cultures, you have an anti-aging industrial complex. It's $500 billion a year in revenue of helping people, often women, feel badly about their natural aging process. We have a product or a service to make you feel better. And I just think that for many people, that sort of ageism of the society seeps into themselves. And so what I've really wanted to do is help create a pro-aging message, help people to see. The subtitle of the book is 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. But also Becca Levy at Yale has shown that when people shift their mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, they gain 7.5 years of additional life, which is more life than any other physical intervention that you could do to help a person live longer. So the first thing we do is help people reframe their relationship with aging. Secondly, we help them to see how to navigate transitions, especially midlife ones, understanding the 3 stages of a transition. Thirdly, we help people cultivate a sense of purpose. And finally, we help people to own their sense of wisdom. What's their mastery? What's their gift? What have they developed in terms of awareness in the course of their lifetime that may be valuable elsewhere? And how do you share that? Because we believe that wisdom is not taught, it's shared. So long story short is there, when you're an adolescent, you have all kinds of programs to help support you through adolescence. And you have a peer group that you're going through it with, and you're experiencing firsts with each other. And yes, adolescence is difficult, but we have developed a lot of social infrastructure to support it. Midolescence is which is a term in sociology, is what you're going through in midlife, and you're going through all kinds of hormonal and emotional and physical and identity transitions. But we have no roadmap, no social infrastructure, no schools, tools, rites of passage, or rituals to help people through this period. And that's why MEA became the world's first midlife wisdom school.
And, Chip, I'm also curious, do you find that there are differences between men and women at this
Oh yeah,
midlife?
for sure. First of all, the whole Hollywood trope about the midlife crisis is usually oriented toward men. It's the man who wants to go back to adolescence and wants to have a red sports car and have an affair. So, first of all, I've not seen a whole lot of men who fit that profile, but it makes for good TV or movies. Instead, what I find is that there are a lot of people who are stuck, and I think that's true for both men and for women. And they're stuck in an identity, stuck in a marriage, stuck in a way of being in life, a mindset that is actually not working for them, a career, etc. So, but I think the big difference between men and women, and there's research that bears this out, but we also have 4,300 alumni from 47 countries now who've come to our campus in Baja, and soon enough we'll have a campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the U.S. And the number one thing I would say that's different between men and women in midlife is men are worried about irrelevance, and women are worried about invisibility. And that may not be everybody, but this is, not just an MEA survey we're talking about here. We're talking about, social science research on this too. So let's look at these two words. For men, irrelevance. For men, what's going on for them often is women are better at jugglers. They have more roles, often many of them caregiving, and they are able to multitask more effectively than men. So what you find is men in, let's say, in their 50s, have had, they have two primary roles. They have their career and they have their family. And they don't have a lot beyond that. In fact, men are much worse than women at keeping friendships alive in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So men are lonelier in their 50s. They have fewer close friends. And with the friends they do have, they're less likely to actually be as open and vulnerable. So men have a big fear in their that often in their 50s, that they're starting to feel less relevant, especially in their career. And they don't have anything to back it up with. They don't have hobbies. They don't have friendships. They don't have other things that they're doing in their life. So if all of a sudden they've defined themselves as their business card, and all of a sudden now the business card's not as important, wow, they have a big gaping hole. And that's hard, really hard for men. And it often leads to the fact that men have 4 times as many suicides as women. And so because they actually feel a little bit lost. So that's what's going on for men. For women, I'll say women have some things going for them. Men often in their 50s, especially if they're a straight white man, it's the very first time in their life that they're dealing with some kind of demographic bias against them, and it's ageism. But if they're a straight white man, they're straight, so therefore they've not dealt with homophobia. They're a man, so they've not had to deal with sexism, and they're white, and so they haven't had to deal with racism in many cultures. Now, again, I'm talking about where cultures that are sort of Caucasian dominant. And so all of a sudden they're dealing with something that they aren't used to is, hey, you don't like me for who I am and for how I look. And that's hard for some men too. So for women, there's a bunch of interesting research from Harvard Business Review and Harvard Business School, which shows that women's sense of confidence grows in their 50s, whereas men's plateaus and start to actually fall off. So women have a confidence, and some of that confidence has to do with in their career. Women sometimes had to interrupt their career more than men for family reasons and caregiving reasons. Women by their 50s sort of feel like they've their talents are more clear to them. And yes, they may be more invisible in the workplace, which is one of the fears, is invisibility. But there's also a sense of confidence and a sense of like, you know what? I'm not just going to be sitting on the sidelines as the woman who just nods her head and leans in. I'm actually going to speak up, and I'm going to be more open to like not being the nice person. I'm going to be the person who's got a great idea that I want to get across. So for women, they have more confidence in speaking up in their 50s. Another thing that happens for women is that if they had kids, it's this varies so much around people, but if they've had kids and their kids are now empty nest, they and their partner are an empty nest, they have some space in their life. They have some time affluence. And because women had a lot more sort of variety in their life in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they can devote it to friends or to being an activist or to gardening or whatever it is, or to being a marathoner. So they have that time affluence that gives them space. Now, here's the big issue for women in their 50s. This invisibility is often physical invisibility in society. And so what does that mean? So yeah, in a career, that could mean a challenge. In the grocery store, it could mean a challenge when someone's not seeing you. But actually, it's often in the romantic world. And so the sense that the silver fox is the guy who's in his 50s or 60s and has gray hair and is Richard Gere or George Clooney, whereas the silver vixen we don't give attention to. And society, based upon what's traditional in heterosexual relationships, is a man can date younger, a woman can't. Now, of course, that's changed a lot, but it's an issue. And the math on single women after age 50, how many there are relative to single men after age 50, is staggering. And not only do you feel badly about the odds, but you also feel more invisible. So because you've been prized for your physical beauty. So that was a little bit more than you wanted, probably. But
that's great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I have so many questions after that. From the people that you have worked with and coached and brought through the Modern Elder Academy, are there any stories? I mean, there's a lot of data, right, that you're talking about the differences between men and women, but I'm curious if there's like a case study or a story of someone who went through the program and like drastically changed their work, what they did in their life. Yeah.
There's so many. Let me give you two stories. One is a social story of two people, and the other one's a singular story of an individual. 6 years ago, when we opened, we had some beta testing where we did the workshop with people, and we wanted to see, if it was working. In one of our beta groups, we had a 6'5" investment banker, white guy from 45 years old from New York, who was retired at 45, and he had a lot of money but very little purpose. And then we had a 4'11" African-American woman from Atlanta, Georgia, who was a social worker. And she was 62 years old. And she had a lot of purpose, but not a lot of money. And over the course of the week together, the two of them bonded. And they bonded in so many different ways. They would go for a walk on the beach. And it was a funny walk to watch the two of them. They looked so different, 6'5", 4'11". But they learned so much from each other, and they've stayed close since then. And so I would say that one of the most important things I've learned is that wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And how do you create the safe crucible for life-changing conversations to happen? So it's less about me as the coach or me as the teacher, although we do teach and we do coach and we do sort of pose really interesting conversation questions. But really, at the end of the day, it's how do you connect with 24 other people from all over the world who you're in this workshop with, very diverse group of people, and you learn from each other. And so that was, I think, one key learning. And so there's a guy named Daca Keltner who started the Greater Good Science Center. He's a UC Berkeley professor. He's shown that the two most common ways people feel awe in the world is collective effervescence, when they feel a deep connection with other people, such that their sense of separation and ego subsides and their sense of communal joy grows. and moral beauty. When you are an enlightened witness for courage, compassion, kindness, equanimity in such a way that makes you feel better about being a human. And that's what we really, double down on at MEA. The second story I'll give you is just an individual. It's a woman who's a litigation attorney, and she was 60 years old, and she hated being a litigation attorney because she was arguing all day long, and it affected her relationships, her friendships, her family, because she just sort of had armor on. And she came to MEA because she knew at 60 she was not ready to retire, but she didn't want to do this anymore. And so she had like read books about, okay, I'm going to figure out how to become a consultant to litigators, and she didn't like that idea either. So she didn't know what to do. And so one of the exercises we did with her and her group was about purpose. And often purpose comes from what excites you, what agitates you, what makes you curious, or something from earlier in your life that feels neglected. And so when she did that exercise, she had a dream, in Baja at nighttime about her grandmother. And the fact that when she was a teenager, she would go over to her grandmother's house and bake pies. And she just loved doing that. And yet, of course, that wasn't a practical thing for her to do according to her family. So she went to law, got college degree, went to law school, etc. But when she travels, she just noted that like she always would go to the bakeries in town because she just wanted to see what they had and what the specialties were culturally in the places she went. So by the end of her week, with a lot of support from her cohort, she decided that she would take a 3-month long pastry chef training, which she would do while she was an attorney. So she'd do that on the side just to see if she liked it. After 3 months, she loved it. And so she quit being an attorney, and she is now a pastry chef and has created a bakery in her neighborhood. Now, if you told her at the start of the workshop, you're going to go from being a litigation attorney to being an entrepreneur with a bakery, she probably would have said, "You're nuts." But now she loves it, and so part of what we have to do is, in order to change our habits, we have to change our habitat. And so part of the reason that our campuses are not like commuter campuses where you're driving from LA to Ojai or San Francisco to Sonoma or, Hudson Valley or New York to Hudson Valley, is we want people to go to places that are slightly foreign, where they're not familiar, they're liminal, and the place is sort of forcing them to actually look at things a little differently. Because, we all know that when we're traveling to a place and we've never seen it before, we do it with very fresh eyes. So, yeah, we have lots of stories like that.
Wow, it's so inspiring, Chip. I'm just so in awe of this journey that these folks are on. And you just recently opened up a campus in Santa Fe as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it opens this spring. Yep, exactly. And we are in the spring. So, yes, it's beautiful. It's 2,600 acres, a regenerative horse ranch in which the retired horses are bringing back the soil through rotational grazing. We have 2 retreat centers there, and we have a lovely set of workshop faculty who are teaching there this spring, summer, and fall. And I love Santa Fe. I mean, it's a place people go sometimes on a pilgrimage. And it has a long history of indigenous elders and wisdom, and nature as a teacher. And so, yeah, it's great to have 2 campuses in 2 beautiful places.
Amazing, amazing. And also, gives people access, right? So 2 different points of
Hmm.
access.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Chip, how have your own relationships changed after starting this work, especially with your parents or maybe some other folks in your life who are a little bit older?
So my parents are both still living. I'm 63. My parents are 86, and I have stage 3 prostate cancer, and spent a lot of time in the San Francisco Bay Area, going through treatment, radiation, etc. Lots of prostate, a radical prostatectomy, taking my prostate out, etc. And so it really gave me a lot of time to spend time with my parents. And I would say that the program has helped me to see the value of elder wisdom. It's helped me to see the importance of social relationships, and especially parents and family. There's a Harvard study that has shown that the number one variable for living a healthier, happier, longer life is how invested are you in your social relationships in midlife and beyond. And so the fact that I was doing all of this, health regimen in a place where both my sisters and my parents live, but I was no longer living in the Bay Area, meant that I got to spend a lot of time with them. So I would say that the program helped me with that. It's also helped me to see that after having been a business person, albeit one with a social mission in my boutique hotel company as well as at Airbnb, I don't really measure myself now on return on investment ROI in the traditional way. I really measure my my sense of, am I doing great work based upon another form of ROI, ripples of impact. What kind of impact am I having out there in the world? And there's a developmental psychologist from long ago named Eric Erickson. And he says that after age 50, the question we really need to, or the statement we really need to sort of hone in on is the idea of I am what survives me. And that, the combination of my health issues, I had an NDE when I was 47 years old. So I died 9 times in 90 minutes and came back. So I'm a person who has a deep sense of calling, and in terms of what I want to do with my life, a sense of urgency. I'm a Scorpio, so I have a sort of love death kind of thing going on where I'm pretty intense. And all of that I own. And I think, if there's anything I have learned in my life, especially as someone who in my teen years struggled very much with who I was, because I wanted to prove to everybody that my self-esteem was going to be based upon my achievements. I was an All-American athlete. I was a valedictorian. I was a student body president, and I was gay, and I was not going to come out. And because my father, who was a Marine captain in the military, in the reserves, I was like, he would never accept me. That's what I thought. And so at 22, I did come out ultimately. And I've lived a life since then, 41 years later, of really being very comfortable with just showing up with who I am. And, as Oscar Wilde long ago said, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And I love that advice, because I spent much of my, my childhood trying to be like everyone else and maybe be a better version of everyone else. And so that made me both someone who is a bit of a chameleon and a competitor. So there's maybe nothing worse than a competitive chameleon. And I have, over the course of my life, really, and I think with MEA in particular, seen how valuable it is to just own who you are, and just to be that person. Because to meet someone who's present with just who they are is so much more interesting to see than to see the person who is doing everything they can to actually make you like them, the classic people pleaser, which I certainly was.
That's powerful. And I want to actually double click in your journey. But, I'm curious, Chip, these days, what do you spend most of your time thinking about? And how is that different from when you first started MEA?
Now that we have 4,300 alumni, I spent a lot of time with our alumni. I really love the people who've gone through our program, and sometimes they've gone through the program 5 times, 6 times. And so I get to really know people pretty well. So that's one thing. I've been writing more. I have a daily blog called Wisdom Well. You'll see it on the MEA website, meawisdom.com, or on chipconley.com. So I also go give a lot more speeches. I gave a TED talk last year on the midlife crisis and chrysalis. And I wrote this book recently, Learning to Live Midlife, that has gotten a lot of attention. So I think, the combination of the intimacy of connection, I teach a lot of workshops as well. I love that. That's my favorite thing to do of all the things I just mentioned. Being in a workshop for 5 days, 5 nights, with 24 people and becoming deeply close to them and getting to know people from the inside out, and seeing people's soulful path, understanding the awakening that's going on inside of them. And to see that with my eyes, to see that, that someone has just broken down after 25 years of just realizing that they're in a marriage where they are the insignificant other, not the significant other. Um, and realizing that they need to piece their life together to make that change, which has been scary. I feel, quite blessed and full of grace by being able to witness this. Um, so I guess that's, I also spend, I'm a ambivert, which means I'm an extrovert and an introvert. So I need space for myself. So I go into nature with my dog. I call it spying on the divine, and I'll go for a 3 hour hike. And I start by just saying, nature, what do you have to teach me today? And my writing is helpful with that too. And my meditating is helpful with that. So I have a very full life, but the only way I can get refueled is if I spend some time by myself.
Mm. I love that. And also spoken like a true Scorpio about going deep with a group of people. I'm a Taurus, so we get along.
Oh
We have
my gosh, my partner, my husband's a Taurus, so yes,
oh
and
yeah.
I've dated my best friend also Cookie's Jamaican woman. She's a Taurus, so I like Taurus. Scorpio and Taurus get along pretty well.
We're thick as thieves. I also dated a Scorpio for 7 years, so I know them well. Um,
I
so
love it.
So, Chip, I want to talk a little bit about your journey because it's so fascinating.
Mm.
You went from hospitality to the world of tech and entrepreneurship at Airbnb, which it feels like that catalyzed the kind of creation of Modern Elder Academy. Can you tell us, kind of what inspired your transition from one thing to the next?
Yeah. Well, I had an NDE, a near-death experience, at 47. I had been running my boutique hotel company for 22 years. I didn't. That NDE happened at a time when I was really struggling. My adult foster son, who's African American, was going to prison wrongfully. My partner at that time, different than the partner I have now, was breaking up with me. I was running out of cash. I didn't want to run the business anymore. We were going through the Great Recession. I lost 5 male friends to suicide, ages 42 to 52, during the Great Recession. So it was just an awful time. And so, you see all of that, you're just like, okay, this isn't working. And then the NDE was like the coup de grace. I was like, okay, I've got to change my life. And so I think it was really the pile up in many ways of what we call a life quake. Sort of like many tremors happening all at once. So I then had in my early 50s, a couple of years of just what I call the midlife atrium, and where I just had some time to reflect and some space to be curious and to focus on things I was passionate about. I was very interested in festivals around the world, and I was interested in hot springs and the geothermal reasons hot springs existed. And I was curious about emotions. I wrote a book about that called Emotional Equations. And then I got this call one day from Brian Chesky, the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. And I knew that I was ready for something new. There's that movie called The Intern, and Robert De Niro in the movie says, musicians don't retire. They quit when there's no more music left inside of them. And so I wasn't a musician, but I knew I had something inside of me, maybe wisdom. I wouldn't have called that, 11 years ago, but I had something inside of me I was ready to share. And so that happened. And so I spent 7.5 years now after that at Airbnb, 4 years full time and 3.5 years part time. So the transition out of Airbnb was very different than the transition from Joie de Vivre, the boutique hotel company, to what was next. Instead of feeling like, oh, shoot, my life isn't working at all, I've got to just change it all, I actually felt like my life was working really well. I was enjoying my 50s. But I was really curious about midlife, and I was really curious about my friends who had taken their own lives. I was really curious about the fact that at Airbnb, they called me the modern elder, someone who's as curious as they are wise. And that's when I had a Baja aha one day. I was writing my book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, at a beach home in Baja, Mexico, an hour north of Cabo San Lucas on the Pacific Ocean. And I went for a run one day, and I just came back from the run thinking, like, why are there no midlife wisdom schools? Why aren't there places for people to sort of reimagine and repurpose themselves in midlife? And that's how MEA came about. So I would say the transition from hotels to having a couple of years off to Airbnb was a transition of difficulty. And but freedom once I had gotten there. The transition from Airbnb to MEA was the opposite. It was a transition of beauty and um, inspiration for wanting to do something and making a difference. And so, yeah, we have on the MEA website. There's a bunch of free resources at the bottom header of the website, and you'll see one called "The Anatomy of a Transition," which I highly recommend people go and click on, and then it's free. You can read it, and I think that transitions can be good and they can be bad. And sometimes you don't even know whether it's good or bad. You just know you're in it. And I can just say today that understanding how to go through a transition is probably one of the most important things we need to know as an adult in the 21st century.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially for I feel like what's coming. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with the Modern Elder Academy, I mean, you created something just so new, right? It was a brand new
Yeah.
concept, and you said it was an easier transition from Airbnb to MEA. But
Yep.
was it an immediate success, or I'm just curious, like how? Yeah.
It depends on how you define success. If you look at it as did in the beta period 6 years ago when we had 13 different beta workshops, week long or 2 week long workshops, did people resonate? The answer was yes. It was pretty clear pretty quickly. Wow, we're onto something, and we're addressing a societal need. But what was harder was like, when you're creating a product that no one's ever used before, how do you price it? How do you make it work? And so I would say that the financial side of it has been a long time coming, meaning that fortunately I was in a place in my life where I'm not taking a salary. And for 6 years now, I've been able to just invest my money and my time and energy and reputation into doing this. But it's part of the reason we decided to grow into Santa Fe, New Mexico, was because we saw enough demand in our first campus in Baja that it's clear that there's a successful financial story here too, that we're moving into. But I think the most important thing is again that ripple of impact. How are we impacting people individually, and then they go back home and they affect people near them, but how are we affecting the zeitgeist, the overall perspective in the society around aging? So aging is not an anti-aging thing; it's a pro-aging thing. So there are 12 things that get better with age, and I point them out in my book. And how do we help people to feel good about being age fluid, which means you are all of the ages you've ever been or ever will be, and you're not defined chronologically by an age or a generation. You have a fluidity about you. And so we've tried to introduce concepts, middlescence, a word that most people didn't know, transitional intelligence, TQ, midlife chrysalis. So we're trying to help change the language. So, if we're successful in some ways, it's because we are helping change the perspective on aging and midlife, in such a way that people are more excited about it than they are dreading it.
Well, you have certainly inspired me to be more excited about it. So I'm very thankful.
Thank you.
Chip, looking back on your journey, what has surprised you the most? It could be about human nature, about your own kind of inner world, but what has surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me the most is this, young kid who was very introverted until about age 13 or 14, puberty, and felt very socially phobic, that I have become a social alchemist. That I'm a mixologist of people. I still need my introversion time, but I learned how to become an extrovert as well. And I learned over time that one of my gifts in life is to know how to mix people in a potent kind of way where they learn from each other and they feel deeply connected. And I have done that at Burning Man as a founding board member of Burning Man. I've done that at Airbnb. I've done that as a boutique hotelier and a restaurateur. I've certainly done that at MEA. And if you'd said that to me when I was a 10-year-old, I would have said like, no way, that's not my skill. I don't have that talent. And so it's been a talent that I have built over time, and one that I now have language for. You could have said, to call myself a social alchemist is giving myself the due credit that there's a value in being a social alchemist. And so, yeah, I think that maybe one of my biggest surprise and maybe biggest awakenings is that there's value for me in the world in this thing that feels somewhat abstract, but it's like so many things. When you experience it, when you see my social alchemist tendencies, it's like that Maya Angelou quote. People won't remember what you said or what you did. They'll remember the way you made them feel. And a social alchemist is really good at that.
I love that so much. It's so funny, Chip. I feel like wherever we come from, I feel like we come from the same place. There's like I feel like I'm talking to someone from my own tribe.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell people as like a call to action, as like your main takeaway?
I think a main takeaway is like, whatever age you are, recognize that aging and growing are the same thing. We have a tendency to say to a 15-year-old, oh my gosh, look at how much you've grown in the last 2 years. But you don't say that to a 55-year-old because you think they're talking about their pot belly. And the truth is, we're growing. It's invisible. Just like the growth of a tree is very visible, but the rings of a tree are inside and tell you how much age that tree has. We have old growth redwoods, and we also have old growth humans. And humans who have growth and are aging at the same time are beautiful. We can be present with our aging and our growth, and hopefully we realize that the playing field as we get older in life is not our body, it's our heart, it's our soul, it's our relational capital, it's our curiosity and our ability to see things and connect the dots. So I would just say, don't be fearful of aging, and recognize that there are many things that get better with age, and focus on those.
Amazing, amazing. And for those listening, check out Chip's TED Talks. My mom cried listening to one, so they're very heartwarming.
Thank you.
And where can people find you in order to learn more about you, your book, the Modern Elder Academy?
Sure. You can find the book anywhere, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. It's my 7th book. So if you want to see the other books, go to chipconley.com and you'll see all the books there. And then MEA, Modern Elder Academy, is meawisdom.com. And as I said, my daily blog is there, as well as on chipconley.com. And we also post it on LinkedIn. So when it comes to social media, I'm probably most active on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chip. This was so lovely. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and you just have
I think so too. I want to hear more about you. I'm sorry, this has all been about me.
No. This show is about you. So this is there's just so much that knowledge and wealth of knowledge that you have, and it's just so wonderful to talk to you. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about midlife chrysalis. I got it right this time, with Chip Conley. And you could tune into Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.